Nobody likes being ignored and left out or just left behind. And so many people with childhood PTSD have it because of these experiences when they were small. Now, maybe your parents were alcoholic or addicted and turned off like a light switch when it was time to give you attention and support. Or maybe one of your parents died or was locked up or just left you like you never existed. And not only was this terrible to happen to you as a kid, to any child, but it can really muck up your adult relationships with anxieties and longings that can really drive away any possibility of genuine, stable connections with people, romantic or otherwise. Abandonment wounds push you into relationships too quickly. The slow pathway, that just wasn't even encoded in your nervous system, but I promise you, you can learn to do it with some techniques, and I do teach that. But when you were a kid, you didn't learn the slow way. And then when you find yourself attached to someone you can't stand or who treats you badly, you may feel like you can't leave because your abandonment triggers kick in and make it feel like leaving would be almost worse than dying. So you go in too fast and then you can't leave. That's how people get stuck. And abandonment wounds can also show up in group dynamics where, I'm willing to lay money on it, you've had horrible experiences of being ostracized, left out, judged by peer groups. And I'll talk about that in this video too. I'm going to talk about why these wounds are so hard to observe in yourself when you kind of flip out on someone because your abandonment wounds get set off. It's like you're not even yourself. And the desperate and sometimes overly intense reaction to feeling abandoned, even when it's just a feeling and no one has actually done it to you in that moment, it's almost like a bad dream. What it actually is an emotional flashback, which is normal with CPTSD. An emotional state from the past comes back and overlays your present time experience. Someone walks out of the room when you're trying to talk to them, and this tsunami of desperation and grief can come over you. That's an abandonment wound. And next thing you know, you're calling them names, you're threatening to leave, you're crying, it feels like your life is over. That's what we call abandonment melange. That's a word Pete Walker contributed to the literature, and it's such a good concept of the intense grief and rage and panic that can come over people when the feeling of abandonment happens, and it's drawing through this emotional flashback on what happened to them as a kid. And I want to talk about why that happens and how emotional injuries that happen before you even had language show up like that as just overpowering emotions that aren't connected to present day circumstances. And you don't even know where they came from, but they are upon you and they feel real. So let's just go over some common triggers that you see in people who were abandoned as kids. The really valuable thing about looking at triggers is that everything that is a symptom of CPTSD only occurs if it gets triggered. And that includes, the neurological dysregulation, disconnecting from people, going into self-defeating behaviors of lashing out, running away, smoking, there's so many self-defeating behaviors. But all of that sort of calms down. It goes dormant like like chickenpox virus if you're not getting triggered. So you can't stop the world from triggering you, but you can learn to calm how you respond to triggers once you know what they are and you have the tools. So let's talk about some of the triggers that can really get you when you have abandonment wounds. One of them is when somebody walks out of the room, if they storm out when you're in the middle of talking. This is a really normal thing. There are some people, including some people with CPTSD, but all kinds of people, when a conversation gets intense, how they sort of self-regulate is they get physical distance for a minute. So they might stroll out of the room for a minute. Now, this is really different than saying, that's it, it's over, and they leave and pack a suitcase and they're out the door. But even that can be the same impulse, the same coping mechanism to flee. So somebody who is actually in the relationship and will come back in the room in just a few minutes sometimes walks out of the room and just goes, oh gosh, I just can't deal with this conversation. For a person with CPTSD, that can be so triggering. It brings back some memory that you don't even have anymore. When you didn't have words, like before the age of 3 or so, you can't really form memories. And so all you remember is the emotion. You can't remember the event. But it's not uncommon in people who grew up in unstable households where there was fighting or addiction or, trauma going on, that would have happened, that your needs would have been neglected, that you would have cried for a very long time in a wet diaper. And that's where these wounds come from. So it's not going to come back as, this reminds me of when I was crying all alone. Like, you won't have that memory, but you'll remember the feeling. And the feeling comes up, and since it's not attached to a cognition of what it was, of what the memory is, it just feels like it's happening right now. And you just think, this terrible person who's making me feel this way, I have got to shut down this relationship. Then, if you have typical CPTSD that wants to do that, that has that reaction to things, maybe an hour later, when you start calming down or when you start going into dissociation and the emotions are calmer, then your emotions come back and you go, oh dear, what have I done? Oh dear, what have I done? If you have the kind of CPTSD I have, you've probably done that before. You may have ruined relationships with it before. All right, similar to that trigger is the silent treatment. Now, the silent treatment, there's minor forms of it where somebody's just like, I'm not going to talk about it with you. And then there's one where, somebody living with you or all the kids at school, they turn their back and they won't talk to you. They shun you. They refuse, there's stonewalling where I won't talk about it. And then there is the silent treatment. And either way, this can be extremely triggering for somebody who was rejected or neglected as a kid. We can't control what other people do, but I would say the silent treatment is emotionally immature. It's not a good way to handle conflict with somebody. And at the extreme, it can be emotional abuse. So I don't recommend doing it or staying with people who keep doing it and don't intend to change it. All right, a third trigger that really gets people who were abandoned as kids is waiting, having to wait for somebody. Now, maybe you were a kid who got left in daycare until the last minute or even later, or your parents were separated and you sat by the window all of Saturday afternoon waiting for your dad to come and pick you up for his time with you and he didn't show. Waiting and not having your needs met is a big thing that can cause CPTSD in the first place. So a lot of people who have this wound, any kind of waiting does it. And the thing is, when it happens, because it's triggering CPTSD, it simultaneously triggers kind of a fog where you go, I think I'm freaking out about getting stood up for this person who said they would come. And then your mind plays a trick and goes, well, it's probably my fault. It's probably just me. And maybe, should I be mad about this? And I get a lot of letters from people where they're like, is it just me? And so sometimes I or our community come in, in the membership community that we have, people can pose those questions in our secret Facebook group, like, is it just me? Or when this guy said he would call me this weekend for the plan and then he didn't call and I waited all day, is that bad? And everybody can go, yeah, that was bad. Maybe some people don't mind being treated like that, but you do, and it's not a happy thing. And it's not a good sign for a relationship. And if it's something that you don't have a boundary around, I have good news for you. You can make a boundary around it. And then future people won't get very far with you if they treat you like that. All right, number 4, feeling jealous and getting gaslit about it. Now, I think this happens a lot when you're dating, that you break up with somebody and then they say, we're just going to be friends, right? Let's just stay friends. And you think, oh yeah, I should do that. That's what people do. And then you have to watch them eventually get together with somebody new and pretend like you're the cool girl, but you're actually jealous and you have to pretend you're not jealous. Anything where something feels terrible to you, but you have to pretend it's not terrible is putting you in danger of like dissociating. And this is something that's been very hard about the age of division that happens over social media, is that people can do terrible things and say terrible things and you can't defend yourself, because if you do and you say anything, you could get attacked by trolls, you could get canceled. We have thousands of people who are going into their CPTSD because they can't speak up, and when people just make up stuff about them. And it's terrifying. It's horrible. And it is a form of narcissistic abuse when people do that to each other. So if you grew up with parents who were neglectful, and for all the reasons they get neglectful, because, they have personality disorders, they're drunk, they're high, they're totally selfish. If that's what was happening, you got told all the time, you got treated badly, and then you're like, oh, get over it, or oh, stop being such a worrywart, or oh, you're just, you're being so old-fashioned. I got that all the time as a kid, and I was very sensitive about it until I learned to calm those triggers a little better. but I can't stand it when I know very well that something bothers me and I'm shamed for being bothered. Now, like everybody else, I've had to be in situations and jobs where something really bothered me and there was nothing that could be done about it. Having a boss who didn't think that I was valuable enough to promote. So some of these things, it's life. It's where it is. And when that happens, if you're an autonomous person, it's time to change jobs, for example, or you're dating somebody. But I wanted to get to this thing where you get gaslit in present time, right? You're dating somebody and they want to hang out with their ex and you're supposed to be cool about it. You're getting gaslit. Like, what's the matter? Why are you so jealous? You just have jealousy. Jealousy is how people feel when they have an expectation of loyalty or monogamy and they feel threatened. And yes, I totally have met people where the jealousy is just kind of rampant. It's not really tied to reality. That can happen, but it's also something that is natural. And if you've been told, like, you don't get to hold out for that, you actually don't have to agree to be an ex's buddy, and you don't have to agree to be okay dating somebody who hangs out with their ex. You get to actually have your boundaries about that, and you get to maybe test out, okay, I think I'm okay with it, and then you're like, I'm not okay with it, actually. And you get to not be okay with it. Don't kid yourself. Don't try to pretend you're somebody you're not, because that can just bring on the old trigger of being abandoned. It is a huge abandonment trigger to be afraid that somebody's going to leave you. And there's part of that that's just baked into relationships, especially in the early stages, especially when you're young. Like that's part of it. But how you can keep yourself healing and intact as a person with CPTSD is to be very clear with yourself about what your boundaries are about that. And to go very slowly in relationships so that you can refrain from attaching too strong before you know if this is somebody who matches you in terms of what you need and expect out of the relationship. Another trigger for people who are abandoned is empty time when there's nothing scheduled. You may find yourself, maybe you overfunction, you fill up all your time. You do frivolous socializing just because the thought of being on your own for an evening just makes you kind of anxious. Maybe a lot of feelings come up. So here's what's really great about the path of healing from trauma is it involves tools that help you make the most of the feelings that come up. So it's actually very fruitful sometimes to be alone for an evening, even when you feel lonely. You sit down and you write your fears and resentments in the way that I teach. And a lot more is going to come up when you're feeling a little bit alone. Less will come up when everybody's waiting for you because everybody's going to go to the restaurant, right? You're going to be like, blah, 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 and go on. But when you're lonely, that can be a fruitful kind of loneliness, is to go ahead and face what's in there. And some of my most powerful experiences of healing have been on those really dark nights of the soul when I was feeling so alone. So empty time can be used very fruitfully for something, and that's healing. All right, number 6, closeness with loved ones can be a trigger. It's kind of ironic, right? It's like not having closeness is a trigger, but sometimes when people really show up and look you in the eye and they love you. And for this, I always think about when I was 15, my dad died of ALS. And a few months before he died, I had to travel from one state to another to visit him. And so the last time I saw him was 4 months before he died. And I will never forget. He was so sad when he said goodbye. He was standing in his driveway, smiling and waving and saying goodbye. And I wanted to run to him and just hug him. But the whole thing was so weird and uncomfortable, I just couldn't. So the intensity of his feelings, of his wanting to give me all that love for the rest of my life it was like a fire hose. It was like trying to drink out of a fire hose, and I couldn't deal with it. And it was a trigger for me. So I was, to have my dad die when I was still a youngster like that, it is a classic form of abandonment. He didn't do it on purpose. He never would have done it if he could have helped it. But first my parents got divorced, and then my mom moved us out of state. And I lost my dad in these stages. And it really, really affected me. And I have no doubt it affected how I approached relationships later. So I've still had time now to reflect on that love that I saw in his face and that I remember through his actions. And he wrote me a series of letters to let me know how much he loved me. He knew he was dying. We all knew. And I still have them. And from time to time, I take them out. And it has to be very time to time. It's so intense to have somebody give you a lifetime of love like that in a letter. And I'm very grateful I have it. I realize some people never even got that. But I thought I didn't get anything. And then later I recovered in the letters and I realized he sort of encapsulated his love so that when I was older, I could get it. And it even says that in one of the letters. I'm writing this down because I think when you're older, it will make more sense to you and you'll be able to appreciate it. And he told me what his work was, what he actually did at work, and told me some stories from his childhood. So it was really great because there just wasn't time. I never got to know him as an adult. And I'm way older now than he was when he died, which is funny to think. And I still miss him. Yeah, still miss him. So, all right, number 7 is watching other people enjoy social ease. Like, why didn't I get the memo? You got triggers installed instead, right? So it can be a trigger for your abandonment when you see other people just not being so effed up in social situations and comparing yourself or imagining that they're okay. One thing I've learned over time is people don't always feel as at ease as you think, but some do. It's true. Some are just like, la la, everything's great. I'm confident. I feel like I fit in everywhere I go. Well, I don't. That's not how I feel. And so sometimes watching them, I start to compare myself, and then I go into the abandonment thing. I'm going to get left out. I just know it's coming. I'll take myself out preemptively. Do you ever do that? I did. All right, another trigger can be seeing other people happy, and you feel like you should be happy. There's no reason you aren't, but you're not happy. You feel shame or ostracized, or you just know in your bones you're never going to fit in. Sometimes, though, you are ostracized because of something about you. Maybe you're prickly. Maybe you don't contribute enough. Maybe you have a vibe that's very stressed out or angry, right? And you might be in a state of confusion about why this is. You think, oh, these other people are terrible. Sometimes people actually are terrible and you just haven't had enough healing to choose people that are great, that you feel good with. Sometimes you go into blame, like you just don't feel okay in yourself and your reflex is to blame other people. And people have nervous systems, so no matter how polite or kind your words are, if you're feeling kind of like with other people, they feel it. And you will find people pulling away. And that has been a lot of my experience in life, where if I were to ask people, how come I'm not included? Not that I did, but if I did, they would have just said, I don't know, you're included. I don't know what you're saying. But I just didn't have a very inviting demeanor. I wasn't positive about getting together. I almost was looking for a way to get left out because I felt so triggered by the whole question of whether I was going to be included, you know? And so when you're healed, you have a little bit more like latitude you get those fears and resentments on paper about that could happen or has happened. And then you just kind of like give it your best shot. And you just go, hey, do you want to hang out? Or, hey, can I tag along? And then you only have to like feel terrible and embarrassed if you and you still don't have to feel terrible and embarrassed, but they could actually reject you. But that's almost never what's going on. So we work on ourselves and then we work on being free enough to express ourselves and ask for what we want. There's always a component of working on ourselves so that we can be nice, good people that people want to hang out with. And that's not a given for everybody with trauma. So I'm kind of talking about how a history of abandonment leads to a present day feeling ostracized. And it is so hard to be ostracized. It does happen for real sometimes. Sometimes there is an overlay. Sometimes people really are just being wicked. Sometimes your trauma wounds are kind of adding to it, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But for ostracization, a trigger is being in groups at all, like just believing I don't belong, I never do, I'm uncomfortable, I'm triggered, I didn't get the memo, I don't like these people, they're also stuck up, they're also perfect, they're also normal, whatever your judgment is. It's not a friendly vibe, right? Second one is feeling overlooked, right? Did you ever do this? When you were in school, when you raised your hand with an answer and somebody else got called on, and then you go, oh no, I wasn't raising my hand. It's this weird shame that some of us feel about like offering ourselves and then getting overlooked. It's like shameful or something. If you stand outside of it and you just think of a little kid raising her hand in class, it's okay. Not everybody can get called on. And so you may have learned, don't raise your hand. Just sit there and act like you don't know the answer either, which is a way to take yourself out of the mix preemptively so you never have to feel ashamed about not getting called on. And this can be applied to jobs and relationships and friend groups and family stuff. And so it really takes a lot of courage to just put yourself out there for what you want afterwards. All right, another trigger, feeling judged, not accepting yourself. You know, if you're feeling judged by other people, I can almost guarantee you have a component of not feeling okay for yourself about what you're doing, who you are. And your first order of business is always going to be to work on that, to work on yourself. All right, here's another one. You know you don't belong, but what happened was you were just crap fitting with this group anyway, just so that you could have people to hang out with. And isn't it funny how you can do that sometimes and just be like, I don't like these people, I don't fit in. So there you have it. You know, when you hang out with people just to use them to fill up your time, that can happen. Number 6, feeling condescended to. That comes from fearing you're not enough, that you don't know enough. And yes, some people are very condescending. Ugh. And it's a trigger. It's a trigger I really don't like. I don't like, you know, when people assume that I don't know something and they explain it to me. And it happens all the time. And I used to get very prickly and want to tell them, look, I know that, I know. And my healing at this stage is I don't even bother. I'm just like, all right, thank you. Because I don't think it's very polite behavior, but I don't feel like taking it on or getting into conflict with people. I just as soon, you know, carry on and keep all my self-regulation available for myself to use. So what can you do about these triggers? The world doesn't stop showing them to you. The one thing that can change is your trauma-driven response, where you shut down, you pull away, you lash out, or you avoid people and you avoid your potential as your only means to control the damage that happens when those responses get unleashed. But that's not great, right? You taking yourself out is you taking yourself out. You can heal your responses when you feel triggered, and even the abandonment ones. And it starts by learning to notice and calm those triggers. When you know what's happening, it stops feeling like it's just consuming you, drowning you. That it stops feeling so real, frankly. A little space appears where you see that you have a choice. And I learned how to do this with the techniques that I call the daily practice. And it's made a huge difference in my life, and it keeps making a difference. That I've pretty much devoted my life, you know, to sharing it with everyone who needs that. That's a lot what this channel is for. And that's what I love about YouTube. Hundreds of thousands of people are using the techniques now. And if you haven't tried them yet, I hope you'll give it a try. See what it does for you. It's a free course. You can learn and try the techniques in less than an hour. And it's very easy to sign up. I've got a link to it, like right here. You can do that right here. And I'll see you very soon.